of the Leo Kingdom.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is David Palmer, the Leo King, and we are here for Tuesday night Deep Astrology, where we're going to go into this whole entire week, December 4th through the 10th of 2018. We're almost out of 2018. Can you believe it? And boy, oh boy, to exit out of this 2018, you know it's going to come with a big bang, don't you? There's a lot going on this week. I mean, wow, there's a lot happening, and I'm so excited to go over the astrology with you. If you've never watched this show before, this is where I channel the astrology for the first part of the show, and then we go deep into the charts, which are brought to you by AstroGold. Go to Esoteric Technologies, follow them on Instagram, or you can also find for PC, if you don't have an Apple or an iPhone, you can get AstroGold through SolarFire for your PC. And actually, AstroGold is also available on Android. So check that out. They are providing the awesome charts for this show. And we have a lot to talk about this week. We start this week with a dark moon in Scorpio, with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio and Venus in shadow in Scorpio, while Mercury retrograde is exactly trining Chiron stationary retrograde, getting ready to come direct as well. So what does this all mean? Well, number one, it's a new moon week, so that's why we have a dark moon. We're at that balsamic phase, the last 30 degrees before we have that new moon, and that's because we can't literally see the moon until like literally right before the sun comes up. So dark moons are a time for us to deeply process a lot, especially with this sun this week, which is squaring Mars, squaring Neptune, and we're going to have Mars and Neptune conjunct. There's this aspect of us really wanting to get things going, and you know, stuff starts to show itself on the horizon, but boy, oh boy, talk about patience. Or just even as well, a dark moon in Scorpio with the sun in Sagittarius is, oh boy, I want to expand, but there's things I really want. So this is about controlling our urges, trying to understand what it is we really, truly want in our lives, relationship-wise, project-wise, and feel-good energy. What's going to make us feel better? Especially with a Chiron stationary retrograde, you're getting ready to come direct in Pisces. At the end of Pisces is kind of this hole to try and fill. And then you got Mercury retrograde, which is trining this spot, trying to understand, well, can I make myself feel better in this way? What desire is going to fix that? Especially because at the same time, Mercury retrograde is stopped in a quincunx over to Uranus. So there's all these crazy things in our identity, and Uranus and Aries of what our desires. So there's a lot of this kind of Martian energy going on right now. A lot of really big Mars stuff, and then you mix in the Venus shadow. What that means is, even though, yes, Venus is out of retrograde, it still has not crossed over the point in which it went retrograde, which was at 10 degrees of Scorpio at the beginning of October. So we've been into a very long Venus retrograde process here that we're starting to come to the answers of what the last 2 months were about. Relationships and projects and these things that make us feel better. And how do we make ourselves feel better? Well, I think this is such a big week to look at the subconscious parts of that and the higher forms of that. Higher meaning, you know, on a more, whether you call that ethereal or more, you know, spiritual path, because after this dark moon in Scorpio with Venus in shadow and Mercury retrograde comes through, we come into a new moon in Sagittarius. And this new moon in Sagittarius, while this dark moon is building, is with the sun squaring Mars and Neptune, which brings up this really intense aspect of wanting to take action, to want to, you know, it's tension. But especially with now Neptune, really having to go through our subconscious, go through our dreams, go through, you know, the parts of ourself that can self-sabotage. I mean, Mars conjunct Neptune in Pisces is definitely a self-sabotaging element, or it's a true, you know, shedding off of the things that are toxic in our life and are holding us back from this amazing new world that is starting to form. And especially because, you know, there is a huge quest coming in 2019 with Jupiter, of course, in its home sign of Sag. And we've got a new moon with this Sagittarian energy, and it's squaring over to Neptune. So there's the possibility of these really high and amazing dreams right now. But while that's going on, we have to go through our own conflict of our own personal inner world of the things that set us back from those dreams to actually happen. Whether they're, just subconscious patterns or addictions, and especially with this Venus element, which is in Scorpio and shadow of the way to feel better in kind of our own deeper ways. And, we're really closing out this Scorpio cycle, which has been going on for 6 years, which has been a very deep look at the dark, the light, all the true naked aspects of who you really are. And it's interesting to me, too, that all this new moon, dark moon, Sun square Neptune, Sun square Mars, Mars conjunct Neptune aspect is all happening while Mercury is stopped, while Chiron is stopped, and looking at the things that aren't working out instead of trying to look at the things that are. So it's kind of a weird element, because what a way to teach us to look bigger and brighter. And, when I think about that energy of, being bigger and being brighter, Sagittarius is about opening up our perception, our belief systems into a much more broader and much more positive state. But what better way to teach us this and to start this lunation cycle for the next month than to do that with us looking at things at a very weird angle? So I think it's extremely important for us to not be looking at things that aren't working in the way that we want, because by overlooking at that space, we're not learning to accept the way things are, and that the way things are is actually getting us to these dreams and to these big, amazing places that are starting to open up in our life. It's through accepting who we are, accepting the weird aspects. And I'll be real, when you got Mercury retrograde stopped, and you've got Chiron stopped, and both at the edge of water signs at the last 3 degrees, which are very intense, emotional, depressional, very dramatic emotional, and very kind of sad and extreme and sometimes dark, I'll be real, definitions of these energies. Because if you look at not only the decans in astrology, but if you even go into deeper and deeper and deeper aspects of these last degrees, it's always the last degrees of water that lead us right before the big fire signs, when we get to really this kind of door opening energy and positivity aspects. So we all got to go through this weird confrontation of a vision of a world that we see in front of us that is amazing and going in the right direction. But whether or not we can integrate into that naturally, or are we going to try and integrate into that by trying to deal with, weird elements in ourselves, weird emotional stuff, weird emotional, like depressive or not satisfied yet, and do things that counteract that positivity? Because when you got Mars conjunct Neptune alone, just by itself, already it's going to be like the warrior Mars, the ego, has to get totally washed down through, whether you call that an ego cleansing, whether you call that a tsunami that takes over your ego. But then when you got the sun squaring this position, it's definitely having to highlight and understand, and all while there's a dark moon, all while there's then a new moon, to really purge this crap in ourselves. This is a time in our lives where we are purging the crap, and we are dealing with, situations that I think we can over dramatize about, us not feeling right, or us not feeling good enough, or this isn't the way I want to feel right now. But you've got to realize that this month, this lunation cycle that starts, is literally going to start a month to where we have to get over the past, get over situations that affect us emotionally, and learn to accept them, learn how to integrate them into something of a better service, lessons that we've learned to do better for the world, instead of go dark and down and not connect with these beautiful visions and these huge doorways spiritually and manifest-wise that are opening in our lives. And when we continue through this week, finally Mercury will come direct right after the new moon. So this will definitely set everything in motion, because at least planetary-wise, the only planet that will be retrograde now is Uranus, which is not going to last for long, because at the beginning of January, Uranus comes direct, okay? But then we got to go through the finishing of Chiron retrograde for the last time, and stationary and going direct in Pisces for 4 more decades. We're so lucky to get out of this, because this Chiron transit in Pisces has been going on pretty much this whole decade. And this has dealt with not only, I think, the spiritual element of learning service and the humbling spiritually of things, combining with Scorpio of traumatic, deep, hardcore, sometimes dark, truthful, edgy situations, but learning to integrate that and use that as service to the world. Now, because everything is aligned so funky here, you have to realize that this Chiron direct is going to be a big one. It's going to bring up situations this week that just feel like, you know what, I am getting screwed, or I'm just not feeling this, or you know, I'm still trying to get over something that's happened to me, and I got to learn to let this go. And guilt comes up big time, especially Chiron in Pisces, and Mars conjunct Neptune. It's the warrior that steps up and comes to the church and gets on his hands and knees and cries to the Pope and says, I'm so sorry that I killed everybody on the battlefield. I don't know what to say. Can I please come to confession? You know, and I think that there becomes this belief system where we start to believe we are wrong for the experiences that we had, or we can actually even step into crazy beliefs about, you know, why did I go through that? I'm such an idiot, or why do I do this to myself? You have been exploring your depths of your soul for a decade, intensely, more than ever before. And we are learning to heal this process, not by fixing it, not by repairing it, by doing more toxic situations just to feel good. It's the typical situation of like somebody who's gone through crap. Like I was just watching an awesome documentary on Netflix from PBS about prohibition. And it was so funny because the way that Europeans or even Englishmen describe the Americans is they drink for every occasion. And the whole buildup to prohibition was like getting rid of the toxic energy, which is causing this bad energy in society of drunks everywhere. Because you got to remember that, you know, before prohibition, through the 1800s, it was normal to go grab a drink for breakfast. It was normal to have actual 3 times a day breaks, not lunch breaks, but drink breaks. You'd be on the job and there'd be some hard cider, and you'd go and you'd drink and you just drink it through, right? So, and it's funny, they also said in one of the quotes, it's like, in America they drink if you win, or if you lose you drink, if, you know, you get married you drink, or if someone dies you drink. You know, I'm not saying that this is about drinking. All I'm trying to say is, are we going to fill something that's bad that's happened to us with another thing like, oh, well, I'll just go ahead and just double down and do something that makes me feel good, even though it might not be great for me to feel good. Although you're just doubling down on not feeling the best, because on the aftermath of what you do, you're still going to feel that same pain in a different way, and a guilt. And this is going to be dealing with a guilt with God. And if you don't believe in God, a guilt with spirit, a guilt with yourself, a guilt with your soul. And then a big wondering, especially with wondering energy of a new moon in Sagittarius, with Jupiter squaring Neptune, you know, this pondering of like, am I like cool with the universe? Am I okay? Like, have I done things wrong? Am I Am I trying, you know, and this brings up escapism aspects, and the most interesting to me is these semi-squares. We've got Uranus, which of course is in Aries, semi-squaring over to Neptune. So, you know, there's this element of what we've done and these radical aspects of trying to understand who we've been over the last decade, because Uranus has been here all decade, since 2010. It has been this huge element where now it's in this semi-square that's been going on half this year very intensely, of, you know, pondering on whether or not how we can integrate our soul and our uniqueness in the world and our true authentic self without feeling this guilt. Then Neptune is quincunxing over to the south node in Capricorn. So there's this other element too that, you know, with Saturn and Pluto and Capricorn and this buildup, and Saturn is almost out of shadow. Because you got to remember that in April, Saturn went retrograde at 9 degrees and Saturn's now at 8. So Saturn's getting ready to turn on. And if you look at this whole week, there's this huge pondering of this whole new world that's about to rev and start up extreme next week. But you've got to go through the dumps of your own soul. You've got to go through the weird elements. You got to go through learning how to control and put boundaries on your desires and your transformational endings or new beginnings, or how you deal with these spaces, because a dark moon in Scorpio alone to start the week off is, you know, doing radical, intense behavior of like, oh, I don't want this anymore. I'm done. I'm out of here. Or I want this really bad. And it reminds me of you know, Frodo and the ring, like precious and all this crazy shit. It's like, okay, it's like, you know, like controlling situations are important right now, and thinking things all the way through, because we are in reactive fixing to feel good fast mode. That's what Mars on Neptune it can be. Not only is it the guilty feeling of the warrior, but it also is the naive fool of the egomaniac that decides to do 15 lines of cocaine and get a sports car and rent it and do 150 miles an hour on the freeway to try and impress some hooker or something. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, maybe that's not going to be the best thing for you to do. So, you know, it really brings up kind of this identity crisis from both extremes of like, where is the identity that is connected with, I've learned my lessons. I've learned the things that are not good for me. I know what is good for me. And I can identify with where I'm going. This is about identifying now with where you're going, who you're going to be, because there's a whole new world opening up with this new moon in Sag. But it has a lot of dingleberries. It has a lot of toilet paper that's, you know, off the roll around the toilet. Now, good thing that the toilet's not overfilled and flowing crap everywhere, like it has been for 6 years of all this Scorpionic and Piscean energy and trine and all the squares and that we were dealing with the Pluto-Uranus square. Like, that was major craziness just 4 years ago. So we're at this point to this new identification of where we're going and thinking about where are we going to sit. Are we going to sit in an identity based upon doing a person that we're trying to facade to be, to compensate for our past, our wounds, or our needing to feel better? Or are we going to identify with a self and a person and an identity and a reactive energy that is going to be based on what I've learned from the past? I don't want to bring more toxicity or go down more old patterns in my life. And I want to actually try a new one by creating this new path. And I think that's what this really is about deeply, is when you actually think about this, this is the most important aspect. we are getting prepared in the biggest of all ways for once Mars passes Neptune this week, for once we get through this new moon, for once we get out of Mercury retrograde, once we get out of Chiron retrograde, we get all this energy starting to move forward. It really is going to be about a new story starting to develop. And this could be the final shedding of the skin this week. So I'm not saying like, you know, if you end up being the dude doing 15 lines of coke like on a sports car with a hooker, like I'm not judging you. But maybe that's your last final part of the skin you got to release in order to step into a life of where you want to go. But I'd hate for you with these energies and how amplified they are with Jupiter to either ruin something. You know, Mars conjunct Neptune can definitely ruin the party or ruin the ego or even ruin things that you identify so intense with. And the energies right now are definitely very sensitive, even though there's this huge optimism around you. But you got to put yourself into that bubble. But before you can get into that bubble of that new world, of all this new optimism and all these new dreams, you've got to confront these really deep subconscious issues very powerfully. And you've got to actually either shed them or you know, wear them in there and, you know, kind of cause some toxic energy into a new energy. It's so funny, like whenever they, I don't know why lately my guides have been coming through with so much like scientific experiments with like pharmaceuticals or something. Like, you know, it's like a clean room. The reason why you go into a clean room, whether it's like building a processor or something, is because you don't want any static electricity, you don't want any dust, you don't want anything to get in there, right? You know, and because humans, we are the biggest dust makers in the world. We're actually pretty toxic motherfuckers, if you didn't know. We like shed dust all the time, right? Like all the dust you see on your counters and stuff, that's human skin. Long story short, the reason why you're going to go into a clean room is because you don't want to contaminate anything, okay? This is us going through a contamination process of cleaning ourselves to enter into this beautiful new world uncontaminated. But we have, you know, it's kind of like if we're in like one of those like zombie movies, or we're in like, you know, one of those movies where the world's like having an outbreak and we are all labeled with like, you know, oh, you've got the contamination. It's like on your forehead, you know? And before you could cross the bridge to where everybody's cool, we need to make sure like you either got that shit out or you know, and I think with all these Chiron elements in Mercury, we can actually believe that we'll never make it on that side, or we can never change, or we can never get rid of this contaminated energy in ourselves, or these darker shades, or these energies that we've attached to in our life that really are not good for us to move into, whether they're relationships or projects or desires or things that make us feel good that are just no longer serving us. And the escapism aspect, or the identity and the ego aspect of identifying with a self that might be contaminated, to actually go into this new bubble, to go into this new world, to go into this new space of where you're going. So you've got to review your relationships, you've got to review your desires, you've got to review a lot of the things in which you associate with feeling good with, and whether or not that's good enough to be in the clean room of this awesome new world that's developing with this new lunation cycle of the new moon in Sagittarius. And you can't feel guilty that you have contamination. You can't feel weird. You've got to assess clearly. Mercury is going to come out of retrograde. But until then, and especially in Scorpio, it is a true detective right now. It is seeing very clearly inside of yourself. Mercury retrograde in Scorpio is very clear. And we've had tons of Mercury retrogrades over the last 6 years in Scorpio, believe it or not. Lots of them. So it's not like you haven't really been deep down and seen every little weird part. This is this last big major like kind of Mercury retrograde with all this shadow energy of Venus, and you know, finishing this whole entire huge long-term Scorpio cycle where we have to like realize, yes, there are things we are attached to still that we have to let go of. There are, and that's especially with the trine to Chiron, which is basically saying like, In order to be humble, to be pure, and to do good for the world, and to cleanse the soul, you've got to be very clear, and you know these aspects. But the Sun in Sag can become really hopeful, especially when it squares over to Neptune, and say, I can continue to do this for like another day. Maybe I could push it another week. Maybe I could push it till some other time I don't even know. Or like my father likes to say, what'll happen soon? And I go, what do you mean? And he goes, September, October, or November. Well, we're already out of November, so that means wait till next September. So when anybody always tells me, I'll do it soon, I always say, when? September, October, or November. And there's this element of us having to realize, like, when are we going to release some of this toxic energy in ourselves? When are we going to release some of these more darker shades of ourselves? And I'm not saying, like, we're all dark people, and we're all bad people, or we're all bad sinners, or we're all these just disgusting human beings. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that internally we got some shit. We got some attachments. We got some relationship attachments. We got some, attachments to desires, these things that we desire so intensely to have. And the way that we go to get them, that has been trying to fill some void that's not working. And this new world will fill that void through positivity, through imagination, and through a higher spiritual self of cleansing and cleaning out and knowing who you really are and accepting that and moving through this. And, we do have the chance with Mars conjunct Neptune to either truly cleanse and be forgiven to ourselves or to God, however you want to look at it, or double down and continue to barrel down into more of the chaos. Mars conjunct Neptune is chaotic. It is a ship that is at full speed going into the Bermuda Triangle. It reminds me of that movie, what was that one? The Perfect Storm. You remember that? I think George Clooney was in that movie, where it's a bunch of fishermen. It's a true story. There's this big storm, and he goes, whatever. We got this. We need to make the money. We're broke. They go all the way out. They go way out there, and then they find the perfect place, and they make the biggest fish they've ever caught in their life, and they fill the whole boat to where it's so full they can't even fill anymore. And then guess what? The Coast Guard starts to say it's this storm, and because their greed, they don't want to lose the fish, they want money. They go through the storm and die. That's Mars conjunct Neptune in Pisces. There's a storm a brewing this week that you could double down into. The signs are everywhere, physically, spiritually, emotionally, by numbers, literally people coming in your life, your cell phone ringing at the moment when you're about to do something, somebody intervening, spirit intervening with you, literally amplified with a new moon square, trying to teach you avoid the storm, or it's okay. You can go out and get more fish another time. Drop the fish, eat the fish, chill in the boat, and wait for the freaking storm to leave. And then if you lose that fish, so what? Come back in. It's just money. It's just this. Venus in Scorpio, why do you think it's at detriment? It's because some of the stuff we attach to in life really does not really mean that much. We could be emotionally obsessed over the idea, over something, to have it, to fill a void, to save the day. When at the end of the day, really, it's about looking bigger and being like, you know what? Is it really is that really going to change my life? It might bring you satisfaction for a minute, for a second. Or, I know some people out there who have orgasms for 45 minutes or more, especially women. Us guys, we don't really get that. But, there's an element of Venus and Scorpio that it only lasts so long. And yes, I know Tantra. I know all the people behind this camera right now. They're like, well, there's Tantra. I know a guy who did 36 hours and just pleasure, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's still 36 hours. The reason why Venus is at home and in Taurus is because it's everlasting. It's stone, it's gold. It doesn't change, it's always there. It never leaves its value. The earth is the most valuable thing on the planet, in the world, in the universe. The earth. So it's us having to renegotiate, especially Mercury retrograde is always a renegotiation inside, especially in Scorpio, with what you're identifying with what you really need and what you really want, and whether or not you're going to go into chaos or try and drive through chaos to get that for just a little quick hit. And is that quick hit actually going to do anything? I think that people are going to be a little bit let down this weekend, and I'll show you guys in the charts, about the things that they're going to try and do to escape the world and to feel better. But Chiron's going to be retrograde on Saturday, it's going to be retrograde on Friday, and even though Mercury comes direct and we get excited Friday, there's still this weird in-between, like 36 hours of Chiron stopped. And maybe a weird situation happening, you know, a car accident, a phone call that somebody's not doing well, you know, somebody gets sick, something just doesn't go the way you like expect it to look and go. This is the last time we're going to see Chiron literally stop station, okay, in Pisces. So, and for 40 more years at least. So, in Pisces at the last degrees, like, so there is going to be some part of ourselves where, yes, there's this magical world starting to see and we're getting ready to go. But at the end of the day, there's going to be some things this week that show up all week, and especially even coming into the weekend, where it's just not going to go exactly the way we see it going. And learning not to let our own desires, our own ego, and our own way that we want it to be to somehow save the way that things have been going in our life, to somehow fix that, and to realize that at the end of the day, the only way to actually, if you want to actually have an answer for fixing any of this, is accepting the way that it is and seeing the beauty all around, seeing where things are going, and starting to live your life in accordance to where you want it to really go. And to actually be that identity, and to actually prove that to God, and to prove that to the universe. And boy, oh boy, at the end of the day, that is what takes major cojones. I always like to say, you know, even though Mars in Pisces gets a very bad rap of being weak, the truth is it's one of the more tougher and more stronger of Mars energies, because the truth comes when the true identity of masculinity and ego is when you can put that aside and you can put a higher source, a compassionate source, and the universe before your own self. Wondering if we all can learn to do that this week. And what if we all were able to do that and step into this new bubble of this new world that is being created as we step through December, and especially as we come into January as the beginnings of the biggest year we will ever see in our whole lives. So that's how I'm channeling it, but I have a lot to show you in the charts, so let's check them out. I got the big coat on today. It's cold in California. California cold's different than like East Coast cold. Even though it's only like 55 degrees, 60 degrees, like it's just like a weird cold. I can't describe it. I got gloves on, I got the big coat on. Whew. Before we go, so I'm going to do a live stream on my Facebook to give away the signed Astrology Guide mag and to give away 2 future lives. I gave people till today to be able to continue to go out and buy the mag and take a picture. Some people posted it up on Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. So anyway, long story short, I'll be doing that live tomorrow when I have some time. I was at the dentist, so I got my tooth fixed, thank God. And long story short, tomorrow I'll do that live Facebook. So even tonight, if you go to a Walmart, maybe you go to some newsstand, we are sold out online, unfortunately, but we are at major retailers, especially grocery stores. So thanks for all the support for that and putting up a picture with you in the mag to win a free reading. And I'm giving away a free reading too, because I promised that at the end of the month. And I'm giving away a free magazine where I'm signing it, but that is actually for the people who bought on that Cyber Monday. But I didn't forget about you all, and I'm doing that tomorrow. All right, let's get to the first chart. And we're going to go through this fast because I feel like I've been talking a lot. So I'm looking at December 4th. I just did this chart about an hour ago. And here we are, this dark moon. See, 16 degrees of Scorpio, and then look at this. There's the sun at 12. So we're within that 30-degree mark. I always like to teach astrology, even though people probably already know this. This is what we call the dark moon, or we call the balsamic phase, okay? So this is a couple days where you need to watch your emotions. And especially since why? Well, we got a north node in Cancer. This is where we're learning to truly focus on is how we deal with our emotions, because how we deal with our emotions will affect our reputation, our status, and how our world gets developed and whether we reach our goals or not. That's a lot to think about right there. But when you get a dark moon in Scorpio, that stinger, whether it's why do you guys think that Scorpio has this with the stinger? One, the stinger can sting you by setting a boundary. Or two, it's got the stinger up because why? Because the Mars energy is always up of masculine and sticking into things. Even though it's a feminine sign, believe it or not, it's got that masculine, feminine energy that's built into it. And so we got to be careful about how we're dealing with our emotions, especially with this Venus element that I talked about. It's at 1 degree now, finally back in, but it's still in shadow until it hits 10 degrees of Scorpio, which is not happening this week. And especially when you go look at the sextile over to Saturn, which hasn't happened fully yet. Saturn is at 8 degrees still in shadow and will not come until 9, I think it's 06 or 09, somewhere in there. But it's right at the beginning at 9 degrees. So we're in shadow still when it comes to, you know, really everything fully taking off and understanding a lot of the project relationship stuff. And I think this week is going to be the most heaviest with trying to understand this whole Venus retrograde thing with this dark moon that covered it. And we have Mercury still retrograde in Scorpio. And of course, at the end of the day, Mars and Neptune, right? These two are going to be together for most of this week. And look at the sun. As we're talking tonight, it's squaring over to Mars at 12, but about to square tomorrow to Neptune. So we're going to look into that right now. Yeah. Alrighty. So December 5th on Wednesday, this is where we got to be very careful. The most careful of them all. I want to tell other children to be very careful. If there is any day to be careful in your life, be careful on December 5th. Very careful. Let's look at why. The moon in Scorpio, dark moon in Scorpio, conjunct Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, at stationary retrograde, which means it's stopped because it's coming direct on the 6th. Okay, late on the 6th, or 7th, depends on where you're on in America. And then look at this. Mars is now coming very close to Neptune, while the sun is exactly square Neptune. Look at that. 1343 Sag, 1343 Pisces. And let's look at this. Chiron, exactly 2754. Oh, and retrograde stationary position stopped because that's coming direct on Sunday way in the early morning. And Mercury, which is stopped, looking exactly at each other at 27 degrees. And the moon in dark moon is going to feel this weird understanding of self, this weird stuff going on in the soul that I've talked about. And Mars is going, well, should I just double down? And with the sun square Neptune, that's the whole, you know, I can see bigger than this. I'm a Sagittarius energy. And Neptune's kind of lost and going, let's escape. Let's just say fuck reality. And I just want to like escape this. Sun square Neptune is just kind of like, later, I'm out of here. I'm not going to look at that. Or I'm going to push things off. Just push them away. I don't want to deal with it right now. Or I don't want to deal with these facts. Or I want to step into the dream and just make the dream happen however it's going to be. And I think that we can come into some really weird vibes on the 5th, because I don't want to say it scares me, but boy, oh boy, at the end of the day, having these elements happen with Mars getting on top of Neptune, with the Sun squaring Neptune, while the dark moon's in Scorpio on a Mercury retrograde stationary, that's trining Chiron and Pisces stationary at these last big, major, intense degrees. So don't overreact or make any crazy decisions or go into some I know it all and this is the path. This can become delusional, like this is it. This could be connections, like this is everything, and then like it fades out. You know, like this is definitely walking into a room with Timothy Leary and having him drop some LSD on you, and you having a revolution of the universe, and then deciding to jump off a cliff, like like what, like so. And I'm not putting him down. I'm a huge Timothy Leary fan, by the way. I'm just saying, like, there is a choice for you to do it or not. And if I was an astrologer, or if you had your astrologer in your life, kind of like you have the Leo King, right? It'd be like, well, maybe today's not the day to do that. And that becomes the peer pressure element. The reason why I say that is with the Sun square Neptune, we can be deceived in many ways, or we could be persuaded in weird ways. And with Mercury retrograde stopped, trining Chiron, weird persuasions, we can persuade ourselves too into bad or weird situations. And the moon in Scorpio, well, I just want it. And with Mercury retrograde, the moon's gonna feel that, and it's gonna feel this weird look at things, and it's gonna look at Chiron and go, this sucks, but okay, well, maybe if I do this, it'll change things. But with the Sun square Neptune and the Sun square Mars, it's like, are you really looking at this whole picture? Are you looking at what it could cause into your life? And Mars on Neptune, gee, many Christmas. I mean, driving into a storm. Are you really going to drive into a chaotic storm or not? That is the question on December 5th. And you will see the end of this week, either you spin out of control, like, or, like, or you could be like, I kind of, went through and I followed the course and I was able to get there, even though it might be a little weird. Or you can spin out. Be careful. That's all I'm saying. Be careful. Put an alert on your phone, December 5th, everybody. Now, let's go into the 6th of December of 2018, Thursday. We have Mercury out of retrograde. And the moon now, even though, yes, it's dark moon, it's starting its new moon cycle. It's in Sagittarius. It went over Jupiter. It's starting to see things. But you know what? This Mercury retrograde ends. So now we can think clear. Yes, it's a dark moon, but it's only a couple, it's within orb. It's not the same kind of a dark moon, especially in a separate sign. So I think that, by the 6th, things really change. Things get much more positive. The sun comes off of Neptune, but here comes Mars on Neptune now, okay? And so now we're in the middle of the storm and how we're handling things. So some really weird situations can come up, especially in the last day of a Mercury stationary retrograde. That was the day before with the dark moon on top of it, with the Sun square Neptune. Oh man, however that situation plays out will definitely be shown here, and having to deal with that, and having to deal, more importantly, with whether or not your ego is really driven into that or not. And Chiron is still stationary, retrograde, and it is stopped. And, at the same token, Venus not really going fast, not coming to 10 yet, still at 2 degrees. It's making, I guess you could say it's making a semi-square over here to the sun, and it's not exact, but you know, there is this element of us, like when we're trying to like feel good and to experience feeling good energy, I think this is a master's test, you know, of how to learn to shed instead of add. Add more crap instead of letting it go. And you know, there is something to say about Mars conjunct Neptune and a new moon square Neptune with Mars and all that stuff. Like, yes, I know it might seem like it is great to do the thing that seems so imaginary, or, you know, to do drugs or to do alcohol or to go on a trip and escape or to do all these things. But you know, if this was 1,000 years ago and I was sitting down with you all and we were all talking about astrology, and back then they didn't know about Neptune. Maybe they did, you never know. Or especially, let's go back a couple thousand years ago. We'd look at this and we'd say, you know what, yeah, I know, we could take on all this stuff or try and make ourselves feel better in these kind of crazy ways, or we could really just take a moment to release things and pause. And when we pause and when we stop in the magic of the universe, we could see. So whenever they do vision quests, whenever you know, anybody does an aspect of like looking into your life, this is the point where you stop to look at it instead of get distracted and to try and find what you're looking for by doing patterns and situations that you've done before that are just kind of maxed over in a different way. And really you get to the bottom of it and it's the same shit, different fucking day. It's the same meal, different salt and pepper. I mean, you know, there's a part of us to really take our time, especially because the new moon still hasn't happened on December 6th, on Thursday. It's still a dark moon. So pausing, I think, is a big aspect of this week, especially before every choice you're making. But the good news is on that Thursday, Mercury does come out of retrograde to help us try and understand things much clearer. Now the new moon, actually in California, it's happening at 11:19 on the 6th. It'll be happening on the 7th if you are anywhere else in the world, or Hawaii and California and Alaska. We're in the West Coast. We're having it on December 6th. But you know, this new moon at 15 degrees. Now, why is this interesting to me? Well, number one, it is making a semi-square over to Venus. So we need to really pay attention to these desires, our relationships, and the projects and the things that make us feel good in our life, and whether or not they are going to go into this new bubble, this new world that's being created. We really have to try and understand, do some research, and look deeper into this. Also, this is major squares over to the Mars-Neptune conjunction, which is literally almost exact. It's within 10 minutes of orb. It is almost exact of Mars and Neptune conjunction. So this is part of the other hard aspect to this new moon, which is saying, like, are you really, is this really like on the journey that you want to go? Are you going to go into chaos? Are you going to go into old patterns? Are you going to continue to hold on to that? Are you going to shed things or not? I mean, we all have choices, and there's no right or wrong here. I just am saying we got a month to go through this, and this is before we go on a big journey. I mean, the quest is truly on in January. We start literally the new year with Mars and Aries, with Sun and Saturn conjunction, with then the planets all turning direct right there at the beginning of the year. So, I mean, there's an element of this where it's kind of like you've got some time. And so I think that there's a lot to shed, but this new moon is popping up a whole new world, and it's about adjusting your life and doing the deep inner work and doing these adjustments inside and not taking on more crap, but really letting it all go and flood it out to enter into this awesome journey that's coming ahead in our lives. And really that's what this new moon's about. I mean, also, you know, I mean, we can look at a lot of other aspects, but, you know, I think at the end of the day, it really is just this bigger aspect, you know, which is the Mars-Neptune square and the Venus semi-square and even the Uranus semi-square to Mars now. What you got to remember, that is really wanting some excitement and some stimulation for what we want in whatever imaginative way, and it's being doubled down by Neptune and delusional. So, you know, it's like, do we really want to open up the doorway? And this is the best way I could describe this new moon. Like, let me think. There are a lot of doorways. There's a lot of infinite places we can go. But we have a major choice that's in front of us now. Not the exact full road, but it's kind of like when I grew up, we used to go to restaurants, and if it was really busy, the non-smoking section always was packed. So as a kid, once in a while, it depends. I'm not trying to put my parents on blast and say they threw us in the smoking section because they never smoked. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes it'd be like, well, I got like 5 tables over there and smoking. It'd be like, okay, yeah, we'll take that, right? So I'm not saying that you're like making your full decision if you're going to be in the smoking section or the non-smoking section, or what, if that's good or that's bad. All I'm saying is this starts to kind of steer the energy of like, where are you kind of taking your life to deal with your inner pains and your inner issues and your inner voids that are missing? Because Chiron is still retrograde and stationed while Mercury's direct looking at it on a new moon. And so we start to steer with Mars and Neptune that high or low vibe, you know? And because maybe we want to eat so fast, we go, yeah, fuck it, I'll take the smoking section. And oh yeah, and then you know, you're in there and you're coughing and oh man, and oh, and I wasn't feeling good today anyway, I had a headache. And it's like, well, okay, well then maybe you should have like kind of looked at these things a little bit more and said, maybe I should have gone to the non-smoking section. I mean, I know that might sound stupid, but this is where that stuff starts to get in alignment, you know? And from Thursday night, but coming into all day Friday and all day Saturday, it is Chiron stationary retrograde. With a new moon happening, it's going to start this new cycle, but it's going to bring up massive weird stuff going on, or things not turning out the way that you want to, or you know, having to deal with some sort of issues inside, or even just in your environment around you, just things kind of going a little funky. This is the last of it. So it's going to be at the most heightened it can be, and it's at the edge degrees, and Mercury is looking at it exactly, which means it's going to be clear as day to us, and it's going to hit us at the deepest part of ourselves, whether that's a travel issue, or whether that's, you know, a communication issue, or an anxiety issue, or, you know, just something not going the way that we thought it would look. But the trine is saying that it's supposed to go that way so you can understand a deeper element that you weren't looking at. You know, chipping my tooth definitely was a Chiron retrograde thing. And I had actually the sun opposing my Chiron when it happened on Saturday. And it was right before going to a Hollywood party. I did a live on it, so I'm not going to go into this deep. But all I'm saying is, by going to the dentist today, it blew my mind because Venus was exactly at the degree today of where when Saturn had entered in, right, 1 degree of when a lot of my fear and my anxieties happened, and I had a root canal then, and that's what triggered my panic disorder and my anxiety disorder and a lot of things. And it was this horrible event, that what seemed horrible at the time, that actually today brought me back to the chair, you know, 6 years later, and we didn't even use Novocaine or nothing, and just did it, you know, where I was actually going through it, and my subconscious was ready to freak out like it did during my root canals, and I've had 3 crowns in 6 years, which is not fun. But, you know, and the drilling and all that, you know, like there's so much for me that was so gnarly and it was so intense, you know, and today it was like, I went through this because it made me get over that fear and that hump. So when I say this to you, it's going to get more extreme. I know that people don't want to hear that. Of weirder situations getting weirder and weirder, and learning that it's going to show you a deeper part of what's missing, what you can do to change that and how you can get rid of parts of yourself, whether that is a fear or whether that's an addiction or whether that's a need for something to experience and feel that no longer is serving you, and it's showing up to get you away. Situations with relationships and people that don't go well during this time are definitely trying to show you, maybe there's a higher path. Maybe there's a different place. Doesn't mean you have to cut them out like with an axe or anything. But maybe it's just trying to show you that this life is not the one that you're meant to be doing. There's another one. And there's a lot of things that are going to show up like that with this element. And let's look at that Friday chart, because well, actually I didn't even do a chart for Friday because it's just that new moon, it's all that energy. But here we're doing Saturday, which is still Chiron retrograde. See that? And stationary, stopped. And Mars will pass over Neptune, so, that's Friday, Mars, Neptune. But Saturday, there's this element of the moon on Saturn. So, control, the new moon in Sag gets really excited about things, especially with the square to Neptune and Mars, about what it can do and what it can want. But it's kind of like, I don't want to say a Debbie Downer. I don't want to say that, but this weekend is really going to be this moon Saturn, moon Pluto, south node. It's going to be Capricorn stuff. So be careful of, not doing things that are wild or too crazy. Capricorn rules our bones, it rules our skeleton, it rules our knees, it rules our cartilage and stuff between the bones. It rules even parts of the spine. I know Leo and the spine are very connected, but more of the heart nervous system aspect of it. But, it's important for us to try and control, to get where we need to go in our lives, the chaos or our subconscious tendencies. That's what the moon in Capricorn is going to be looking at to support this Mars-Neptune while Chiron's getting ready to come direct on Sunday. And, we got the sun. Yeah, sure, it's off this aspect. But, it's still in semi-square with the Venus. So, this element's been happening a lot because it's been a Venus retrograde year. And so this has been a lot of things that we think are going to be great and make us feel better, and then they kind of just drift off and don't make you feel good. It's kind of like going out and buying whatever, whether you go out and buy a car or buy a TV or, I don't know, whatever you like. Maybe you go out and buy my magazine and you go, what the fuck, this thing sucks, man, shit, I wanted to feel good. There's little things that we try to do, or, I'm going to, if you're single, I'm going to go in this relationship. Or even if you are not single or married, some people might do crazy shit, just to feel better or try and fill some sort of void. But it's not going to show up the way that we want to. There's so many semi-squares, it's insane. I'm like laughing my ass off about the semi-squares. They're everywhere, and this is Mars on Neptune. Your ego is not gonna get it the way that you expect it to get it. There is a divine order up there that is gonna show you by signs, by intervention, of where to go. And this moon, south node, Saturn, Pluto, Capricorn on Saturday, while Chiron's stationary, retrograde, ready to come direct, is going to make you realize wherever you're at on that day, the way that you're trying to go about your life to feel good is probably not the direction in which will actually be what will be the ultimate happiness. There is a whole new road and a whole new world with that new moon in Sag that happened the day before and the day before that. And that's going to be the realization. It's like, holy shit. there's another level. Am I going to continue to stay on this level? We could add to the backup of that, especially with the moon conjunct Saturn. Look at this. And I'll have to throw away some of these things. Look at this, 8:41. We are only 20, I think it's 29, I think, maybe 28 minutes, okay? Minutes. Which means just not even a degree away from getting out of shadow and ready to move up the ladder in our life. And so the moon, coming on the last point of 2018's shadow period of Saturn, on the day that Chiron is stopped, on the day that Uranus is semi-squaring Mars and Neptune, watch how you still drive, do aspects. You know, this is not very friendly with Uranus, okay? This is not good. Especially not paying attention or being drunk or being on drugs or being delusional and taking radical crazy action or doing something stupid or crazy. Especially with the moon on Saturn, you do not want to have a bad weekend. Because the moon, remember, in Capricorn is at detriment. And Saturn's at home. It's in dignity. It's dignified. And when you have a moon on Saturn in dignification at the last point of its shadow of the whole last, well, since April, that's 8 months. This is the last time. It's about moving to another level now. You're realizing that, you know what, yeah, my life, I'm going to a new level. I don't need to be doing this, or I don't need to be going through these situations anymore. I don't need to do this to make myself feel good. This isn't what's going to do it anymore. This isn't what's going to fill me up anymore. Because I'm done with this level. It's like getting out of the fucking baby pool. I remember I grew up on swim team, so, you know, we always swam in the big pool, the 25-yard or the 50-yard or meter they go by now. But, you know, we used to have fun at swim meets, and we'd have fun just fooling around and messing around and pushing each other and going to the baby pool. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think after like a minute or two of that, we all kind of looked at each other and went, yeah, why are we in the fucking baby pool? Like, there's babies around. Like, this is where we realize we've put ourselves in our own little baby pools because we felt comfortable. This is what's always made us feel good. This is what's always been kind of the way that we do things. But it's over. Now, I haven't been in a baby pool in fucking a long time. But I can tell you that we are all being forced this week to realize that there is another level. And next week, with Saturn coming out of shadow, Venus coming out of shadow, is moving us to the next level. In our feel-good needs, in our wants, in our relationships, and all that. And we have to communicate with now Mercury, trine Chiron, some very weird shit, literally and internally, about the honest truth about that there is a void, there is a hole, because we have completed a cycle in our soul of a pattern in which no longer fills us up anymore. That's some deep fucking astrology, motherfuckers. All right, so we're going to move to the last charts here, the last two. December 9th, 2018. Chiron comes direct. That night, it's really early in the morning, but in the morning, boom. So now, look at this. Look at this chart. Where are the red? Oh, it's just Uranus. It's the last energy retrograde. Don't pay attention to the nodes. They go back and forth like freaking, like Charlie Sheen does with his career. Mercury is in almost an exact trine as Chiron turns on, and that's the realization this weekend. Sunday kind of is, with the moon on Pluto, the ready to step up a level, the ready to change. And with the sun at 17, you know, it's not that it's still exactly squaring Mars, but, you know, I think some of the tension's starting to ease off a little. And we have Venus, of course, which has come to 4. It's not exactly out of shadow, but it's still in semi-square. So there's a little bit of a bad taste, but also the understanding that we can find the better taste by going to a higher level, by learning more, by experiencing new experiences that we haven't done before. Because the truth is what you're going to realize at the end of the day of why you're not being filled up, why you're not satisfied and happy, why it's not the way that you want to go, especially there's still that opposition to Uranus, is because this Uranus and this Sun and this Jupiter and Sag are about, and Saturn as well, and even Neptune in its home sign, all of it, 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 at the end of the day is saying that you have to experience new things. You have to experience a new world. You need to take yourself to a new way of doing things, a new belief structure. You need to expand. You need to do your own spiritual travel to a new way. That we have all come to the end. There is no longer anything left in this bucket of desire and happiness and fulfillment. We have to change. We have to experience it the way we now want to go experience it, which is in front of our face this whole week. Changing plans to that is not a bad thing. You can be more psychic than ever this week. Ever, 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 ever. Ever with Mercury retrograde coming direct in Scorpio, with the trine to Chiron coming direct, with the Sun square Neptune this week, with the new Moon square Neptune, with Mars conjunct Neptune. These are the positives. With the Moon on Saturn, with all this aspect. Holy mother. Guess what? You already know how it's all going to play out. So, maybe you do just want to go through the experience of what's not the way that you want it to go, because you want to feel the end. It's like watching a movie again and knowing it doesn't end the way you like it, but you want to watch it anyway. It'll be interesting to see people who don't want to watch it and go, I've already seen it, I'm already done it, I'm ready to make the change, and I'm ready to go experience a new thing and communicate that and understand that, or wait till the very end on Saturday and into Sunday when it's like, fuck, get this shit now, okay, you know? And I don't like to put out warnings or anything like that, but, you know, and there's a sign right there, is this thing, pen falling. Like, be careful this week with what you're doing and what you're getting into, and this is shaky ground. This is thin ice. And believing that you can run on it with fucking lead boots on. So, and especially with this, and we'll show the last chart here on Monday. What I really want to show is this whole week, it is Mars in semi-square to Uranus and in semi-square to the South Node in Capricorn with Neptune on it. We have to learn to not be too wild and crazy. We have to learn to be tailored, but we also have to learn to be highly imaginative. We do need our escapes, but we need it to not go into crazyville. We do not need to create chaos. We do not need to go into old patterns. We do not need to re-identify with a past self. A past self is just, we don't want to go backwards to who we were at one point in our life that we don't like and that we were before. How else are we going to move to a new experience, a new world? No, my Siri just went on. That's crazy. And, you know, we finish, and this is pretty intense too on Monday. The moon finishes in Capricorn, crosses the south node, squares Uranus, which activates this whole entire square, semi-sextile, and semi-square and semi-square. It is massive, okay? While Chiron's now direct, while Mercury comes off Chiron, 28, starting to move, Jupiter moves to 7, and we move into Monday with, look at this, Saturn only, I think it's like 14 minutes away. It's like ready to move to the new round. Venus, 5 degrees away, it's going to move quick, ready to move to the new round. All these planets direct except Uranus, which is being squared, the only retrograde planet in the middle of this Mars, Neptune, semi-square, semi-square, Mars square this, and then the moon moves into Aquarius with the sun in Sag, and we get it, and we start to figure out how to do that by Monday night. Monday night, we truly go, you know what? The new world, this new higher realm, this more electric world requires reinvention of myself. I have experienced the past selves. I have experienced what's no longer good. I've experienced the toxicity. I want to go in the clean room. I want to go into the new world. I want to go into a better place. I am ready. I am ready. I'm ready for this awesome experience and world. So don't be afraid. The only thing to be afraid of is not being aware of any of this and choosing not to listen or choosing not to look at the stars or choosing not to pay attention to all this. There is a little bit of a rite of passage into this new world that is coming. And that rite of passage is whether or not you are aware or not aware, whether or not your ego is more important than moving to a new higher place in your life. That's all ego is. It's not. We associate it with, yeah, the guy doing 15 line of cocaine with a hooker fucking going down Hollywood Boulevard. Or I look at it as an ego is a soul that is deciding not to listen to spirit and the signs everywhere of knowing that you can go into this old story or you're trying to fill up your own cup in the middle of a chaotic situation that already doesn't feel aligned. That's the best advice I can give you. If the timing's off, if things are not in alignment, if things just don't feel like they're going to work the way that they're going to work, don't do it. This is a big week because it's not only a big week, but this is a big new moon. That lasts for 28 days, 30 days of the next month cycle. We do not want to do things that just do not feel off and not in alignment. If it's not in alignment, and if it's not of your highest good, if it just feels like it's not, right, and you're just going to barrel into the storm, this weekend is a perfect storm movie scenario. And I'm not trying to scare people. I'm just trying to tell people, like, pay attention. Pay attention. Because it's the end of these shadow periods. It's every planet except one direct. And that happens Friday, Thursday, basically, but, Friday into Sunday is the last moment before it all clicks. And there's a weird moment there at the hardest aspect and degree. And before we all go, and don't put this up yet, Craig, because it's going through my private pictures. There's some weird ones in there. I wonder if I have this. Yes, I do have it. I do have it. So we can show it now. So I did this in my webinar, and I would love people to check the webinar out. But, okay, so we are going to look at the last degrees of Pisces, okay? So this is the sign of Pisces, right? It rules the feet. We'll have some fun. It rules the feet. I got this, by the way, through Santos Bonacci's site. Santos is the man. So this whole entire sign is Pisces, okay? So when you look at the first degrees of Pisces, all right, they start as a Venus-Venus, very positive aspect. but also really the main, you know, kind of deacons, it's Saturn. But when you're getting to the end of Pisces, we're dealing at the end degrees here of this double Saturn, this Capricornian, Aquarius, Saturn element, Mars, double moon. The ending of the zodiac is the hardest. Depression, low blood pressure, you know, difficulty clotting because things are just like too loose. Or it could be the opposite, things really clotting. Diabetes, but it's mainly, you know, depression, drowning, you know, like very hard aspects that hit our life at these last degrees. This is why they always say the experience, the darkness always comes before the dawn. This is where Chiron is coming direct on Sunday morning and is stopped during the middle of a Mercury retrograde all week, trining it during a new moon square Neptune, during a Mars conjunct Neptune. I'm telling you all, you do not want to get burned in a hard place. This is gnarly stuff. Because once Chiron moves into Aries in February, look at it, comes into the beginning of Aries, Jupiter, Aries, Mars, positive in its sign. That's why the spring and the new year of astrology is Aries. And that's why the end of winter and the last day of winter always feels like the longest day. And this is also, if you look at the Christ energy too, and Santos has talked about this. Michael Luton just talked about this on Turning of the Wheel a couple weeks ago on Chris Flisher's page. But look at this. The last 3 degrees of Pisces is this Saturn aspect. The hardest 3 days. It was Christ's hardest 3 days after he died. Before he rose up to the Christ-like energy and came into the light, which is in the Aries of the Ram with the Jupiter aspect. Do you really want to go on that cross this weekend and this week and go through that 3 days and have it as the most extreme, crazy, radical, negative experience of being thrown into radicalism of extremes and weirdness? Or can you go through that 3 days of how Christ did in peace and solace by removing the dramatic and dramas of escapism and of toxicity and knowing that you've come to the end of a story and to accept it instead of try and put a Band-Aid on it. So that's where you should check out my webinar. It's pretty awesome. It was actually done last night, so now is the recording. So you can download my December 2018 horoscope. It's almost 2 hours long. And if you think you liked me going through this chart here, the synchronata that I got through Santos Bonacci, I go through that for the whole month with all these cycles. I go through the new moon with it, I go through it, and I go through so many aspects. There's so much going on, especially with Venus coming out of its stationary position or its shadow. We've got massive stuff going on. It's going to be insane. Mercury coming on top of Jupiter, Jupiter coming on top of Antares, the solstice full moon in Cancer on the day that we start the winter or the summer if you're in Australia, full moon exactly on the solstice. So much to talk about how to get on this quest. Check it out at theleoking.com. Anyway, thanks everybody for being here. Couple more weeks of the show. So the last date of this show on Facebook and YouTube will be December, I think it's 17th. So I'm giving people 2 more weeks to get on futurelife.tv. And that's giving me a couple more weeks to put out some new content to prove to you all I'm not just going to leave you high and dry on YouTube. But if this show you think changes your life every week, it helps me out to continue this going just by subscribing for $5.99 a month at futurelife.tv. And you get me daily with daily video horoscopes that are on green screen, professional, weekly sun sign video horoscopes that I do, weekly tarot, weekly intuitive, and I do a daily tarot poll, and I do notifications on your phone every day of the astrology, sending you stuff every day for just $5.99. So if you're ready to make the leap, it's futurelife.tv. It's a web page. If you want to be on the app, great. If you don't, web page. But everybody, I recommend going on the web page to buy. It's so much easier to buy instead of going through Apple or Google and dealing with them, because they are just so weird when it comes to your subscription and your setup. It's so much easier just to go on the webpage and buy, and then log into the app. We have a login button. You create your login at futurelife.tv, and you can watch it. You can even be on your, if you're on an Android, just go futurelife.tv on your phone and click into there, log in, and it's just like the app. Anyway, I appreciate everybody for always supporting me on this show, supporting me with the mag, supporting me in every way. And I hope that this show has helped you. I know there's a couple weeks left. I feel like Johnny Carson or something, ending the Tonight Show. But at the end of the day, you know, even this is coming to an end. Not in the sense of the show, but how it's being distributed. And so there's something new that I've got to go show you guys out there. But, you know, lots of things are coming to a change. And it's going to be pretty wild to see how it is. Be careful out there this week. It's a wild universe, and it's on ultra hot. Thanks so much for all your support. Truly appreciate it. And I will see all of you next week.